Hi, welcome to City at a Glance. I'm your host, David Young, and with us, as always, is our city manager, Darren Atterbury. Darren, thank you for being here today.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Today on City at a Glance, we're going to discuss a very important topic, which is the CSU city town gown relationship, and then a little project you may have heard of, the stadium, which is a big topic right now for the city. So we'll be discussing that. To help us talk about that, we have with us our Deputy City Manager, Jeff Mihalik. Jeff, thank you very much for being here today.
Happy to be here. Good to see you.
Thank you. And from CSU, we have with us Joe Parker, the CSU Director of Athletics. Joe, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, David.
And Fred Haberacht. Fred is our campus planner for CSU. Fred, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, David.
So to kick things off, we'll just start with the City of Fort Collins would certainly not be the City of Fort Collins were it not for CSU. Darren, could you just kind of speak a little bit to that town gown relationship and how the campus and CSU impacts the city and vice versa?
Yeah, well, that's a complete session on its own, David. But real quickly, I've had over the years one or two people who've said to me, Fort Collins doesn't feel like a college town anymore. It's so large and the university's so large. And my response to that is if we ever lose our identity as a town gown, as a college town, then we're really missing out on the leverage and we're missing out on the quality of the community. So I would argue very strongly that this community is as wonderful as it is because of the university's presence. And I hope that, and I know Dr. Frank and others feel like the quality of the community also is a huge reflection on the university. So and David, as you said, today we're going to talk about the stadium. So much of this town gown relationship and how we've moved through the stadium conversation is, in my opinion, is all about relationships. And the two gentlemen from Colorado State, I can't say enough about the relationship with you guys, and I'm so thankful for Fred, the years and years you and I have been working together, 20 years when you were a private consultant and I was an assistant city manager, and Joe, you've been an incredible partner in this thing, and I think you're in a big way responsible for the level of play in the town gown relationship right now. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation, and I just want to thank you on behalf of the city for the way in which you guys do your jobs, because you've done it in a way that's great dignity. You've done it with great compassion and passion, and also competency. So I want to welcome you guys to this discussion, and I look forward to what we're going to talk about today. So thanks.
So before we get into the big topic of the stadium, which is certainly on everybody's minds right now, I just wanted to touch on some of the other partnerships that CSU and the city have. There's a number of them, from research to transportation. There's a variety of different things that people might not even be aware of that the city of Fort Collins and CSU partner on. To begin with, can we just kind of speak to a little of that and let viewers know about some of those town gown partnerships that we have in place?
Well, I'll start in with transit. I think that the genesis of transport in the city is CSU, and they've been a partner and a major contributor to transport all these years, and continues to be today. Probably the flagship piece of transport today is MAX, and MAX is an example of that partnership from the inception, CSU and the city together in that, and the payoff has been huge. It's been a transformative part of the city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I could add too, I mean, one thing that's real common between Colorado State and the city of Fort Collins is really our goal to be both a sustainable campus and a sustainable city with our climate action plan, and CSU's been a great job partnering with us to make sure that the students, the faculty all address that and take it on full bore. And a lot of that has to do with either their commitment to LEED certified buildings, just like we do for the city of Fort Collins, but also how people get to and from campus. And it's huge as well. Fred already mentioned MAX, but they have the Around the Horn bus system too on campus. It's actually owned and operated by Transport, but they pay for it. And some of our highest use transport lines are also West Elizabeth, which is mainly for students and faculty as well. And having that commitment together to get people on and off campus is just one great example of how we're partnering together to meet our climate action plans.
I guess, David, I would also add, just maybe at a really high level, the presence of faculty and staff in our community and in our neighborhoods and on our boards and commissions. And then we have to mention something about nearly 30,000 students and the impact that they have, both economically, but also in keeping this community young and thriving. And with that, there are some issues that we have to deal with, and in some cases very significant. And when there's impacts in neighborhoods, some of our single-family neighborhoods and things like that. And we've done shows on that very topic. But I think that again, I'll say, I think without Colorado State, I think Fort Collins would be a very, very different community. And I think this really is a critical town-gown relationship. Associated students at CSU, they've
Yeah.
been, and Fred mentioned transit. I mean, students pay a significant fee for transit service, but also in a lot of other things. ASCSU, as I've been in the city manager's role, every year, the ASCSU administration, we've had regular conversations with. Some have been more effective than others, but every year we meet with the administration. Now you'll see ASCSU represented down at city council meetings, communicating what some of the needs of students are and so forth. And so I think it's been very positive. And I don't want to come off naive that we've had our challenges as well, but I think when we've had those, I've found Colorado State administration to be very responsive to those concerns.
Yeah, Fort Collins and CSU are certainly, you can't have one without
Yeah,
the other.
right.
They're invaluable to each other. So let's talk a bit about the stadium now. That's something that's definitely, everybody's watched it come up and seen it come together, and we're getting close to the opening date. But before we get to that, let's step back and talk about the beginning. A couple years back, an intergovernmental agreement was formed between CSU and the city of Fort Collins. And people might not be aware of this or remember that this took place, but this was very monumental in the inception of the building of the stadium. Darren and Fred and Joe and Jeff as well, everybody, could you kind of speak to that IGA and kind of explain to folks what that is and what that laid the path for?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start off with that. So when we knew CSU was going to build a new stadium, right in the heart of campus and adjacent to existing neighborhoods, our commitment to the community was that the stadium would need a lot of infrastructure improvements, and we wanted to make sure that those improvements not only took care of the stadium, but candidly made it better for everybody in the city and particularly those adjacent neighborhoods. So it's really more than anything else, a way to share cost to put the infrastructure in place, so we needed to have wonderful game day activities. And I got to tell you, CSU's done a particularly nice job making sure that when the costs are uniquely attributable to the stadium, 100% of those costs are being paid for by CSU, and we appreciate it. IGA covers a lot of ground. We're talking mostly infrastructure, so expanded sewer lines, water lines, stormwater, pedestrian, transit, enhanced police services. Again, everything to make it easy, safe, and wonderful for people to get to the stadium and get out, and to enhance the neighborhood as well. So it's an agreement, I think, that's pretty unique in the United States, but it's all about partnership. And we spent quite a bit of time working with CSU on that, got a lot of input from residents, and we think it's in great shape, and so far it's served us really well.
I think the outcome is that this friction point, and Darren points it out, there's an interface between the town and the gown. And I think these IGA projects loosen that friction, and they create a lot of access between those. So 2 new pedestrian tunnels are an outcome. 2 on Laurel Street, 2 pedestrian bike crossings. With the city, the Pitkin Street low stress network then is another example of breaking down that barrier. So a lot of these projects are creating, for the long term, safe accommodation for bikes and pedestrians, cars, and really in a broader sense, breaking down the town gown barrier. We're more accessible. It's important for us to be welcoming the community to campus, and these projects have, in large part, accomplished that.
Yeah, and because it's public infrastructure, even when there is nothing going on at the stadium, a non-game day event, our residents still get to take advantage of that robust infrastructure, which is great. They can cross the street safely, they can go underneath the street, they can use the public parking spaces. So it's going to have a positive impact 365.
So with the upcoming football season and folks starting to get into the stadium, let's touch a bit on that. What can residents and visitors expect to see this year when they attend a game at CSU? Kind of paint a picture for the community of what this new stadium will include.
You want me to start with that one, Fred?
Well, I just say that they're going to see the first football game in the nation.
Yeah, yeah. They will, yeah. So August 26th, we'll play Oregon State. The ball goes in the air at 12:30 Mountain Time, and it will, in fact, as Fred mentioned, be the first time college football kicks off for the 17 season. What will people see? I think they'll see a lot of thought that went into the planning of what we wanted the game day to look like. We spent better than 2 years in pretty deep dialogue with a lot of voices within the campus, outside the campus, and the community. Certainly one of the interfaces for that activity has been the Stadium Advisory Group. And we've, I think, really struck on some really sound fundamental ideas. Fred, earlier before we started the show, we were talking about just the framework. We had put together really kind of the 30,000-foot view of what we thought were all the pieces that we needed to have in game day. Considerations related to parking and tailgating and other modes of transportation. You know, what were we going to do with faculty staff parking for those people that needed to work on a game day? So all of those elements have really been vetted very, very well, I think, in the last 2 years. So we'll have some challenges, I think, because, you know, first game is always the first game, whether it's a new facility or not. But as we all kind of go up that learning curve, I think the experience is going to be pretty special for everyone. What we're striving for is to create really the best game day environment in the nation.
Are you willing to make a prediction about the outcome of the game?
It'll be an exciting game on the field for sure.
You know, I think about all of us around the table, and particularly the three of you, and the logistics that have gone into game day, you know, we've got to remember we have a football game going on too, right? Where there's a win or there's a loss, but I have I think it's. I guess why I'm saying this, I'd like to convey to our viewers how much work has gone into the operations of, and I've learned this much of what it takes, and again, Joe, I think even you and Jeff and Fred participating on the Stadium Advisory Group, I think it'd be good to expand a little bit and talk about that. But the details in which you guys went through, and then your team, your staffs going through and really deeply committed to making sure that those operations go so well, and that I remember you asked about process and a little bit of history. I remember when Dr. Frank and I we traveled back to the University of Minnesota and saw their new stadium, and we were talking to neighbors and talking to the athletic department and talking to the president's office, the president of the university, and I remember in traveling with Dr. Frank the instant didn't have to be convinced that if we're going to do this, we really need to do this right. We need to be a great neighbor. And that was compelling to me from day one. And I shared that with council members as I came back. And just the details that you're spending so much time on. There's a game going on. As our mayor says, you know, what he hopes for is Sunday's paper says, you know, Colorado State wins, and none of the logistical things that we're working on, you know, and for us at the city, you know, we want to make sure that the transit system that you talked about earlier, the MAX and the transport system, performs and gets people there, and it doesn't shut down because there's too many people, or it's, you know, and so the details around the logistics around moving people through MAX and then the walk from Max to the stadium, and then what happens if someone parks in a neighborhood, and the logistics around towing and things like that. And so I don't want to come off Pollyannish. I want to come off sincere and say thank you for that planning, because I've not ever been exposed to such a logistical team effort.
Well, I think that, you know, key to it has been trust between the staff of CSU and the city, because we work cooperatively towards that. And I think it's for both you and Dr. Frank, you enabled that to happen. So there was, from our initial meetings on the IGA, there was we found common ground trying to solve problems that were in keeping with community values, right? So community values of a multimodal approach to getting people to and from the stadium. Community values of preserving neighborhood quality. So I think that's been embodied in the plan, but we wouldn't have done it without the human capital, the relationships. If we have a great success, CSU wins is the headline. It's going to be because of the relationships and the trust with staff. And if it isn't the CSU wins initially, it's going to be, we will, and it's the willingness of the parties to work through any kind of difficulties and come to a solution that does meet the community values.
Yeah, good. That's great.
And you kind of already answered my next question, which was one of the main touch points between the new stadium and the city is that transportation, the parking, the bike trails, the public transit. Fred, would you like to speak a little bit deeper to some of the infrastructure and how that might play out on game day?
Sure. So we approached the problem, the framework of it, through a systems approach. So that each parking, transportation, transit, bike, and pedestrian all had a seat at the table. That's this multimodal approach. What it will look like on game day is that there are some 8,500 parking spaces provided for fans of the game. Those on main campus, some 5,500, are going to be associated with a season ticket, and those on our South Campus will be their cash sales. All of that is supported by, so here's the next layer. All of that parking is supported by transit. So if you're parking in the South Campus parking lots, some 2,500 spaces, you're supported by continuous transit. If you're on campus, you're supported by a ADA shuttle if that is a need. Bike and pedestrians are integrated into the plan, and there's a lot of collision avoidance between these different modes. So, as Darren's saying, a lot of planning, and planning from an early stage on a systems approach to solving the problem. So, parking, bike parking. We have over 10,000 bike parking spaces on campus to support. We've got 6,200 students that live on main campus in residence life that have the opportunity to come to the game. They are our season ticket holders as well.
Yeah, and I'll just add too, speaking to the human capital, there'll be CSU students and volunteers all over campus. We'll have city volunteers too at the MAC stations, out in the neighborhoods, making sure people know how to get to the stadium really easily, where to park. Equally important, where not to park in the neighborhoods, but we'll have people out in force too, in easily identifiable outfits, so people can say, hey, where do I need to go, and we'll get them there real quickly.
We've talked a lot about the learning that will take place on that first game and even through the first season, but just to hopefully, get people settled a little bit. I like to look at kind of the macro terms of the problem. The Hughes site's 160 acres accessible on one side, and we had 10,000 students that were trying to figure out vehicle transportation to that site. And the impacts of that was about 3,000 cars on the site that were associated with students. So you bring it to campus starting in August on the 26th, then Campus Fred is over 400 acres, accessible on four sides. We've already talked about the access to MAX, which is public transportation that never existed for the Hughes site. And now we're not asking 10,000 students to jump in cars and transition to a stadium location. That's a very pedestrian experience for them, or they're going to be on their bikes, or they're going to use a longboard. I mean, I've never seen a campus that has longboard racks, and we do, and the stadium does too. So it's pretty exciting. We're going to encourage people to be patient and arrive early, but we put, as we've all discussed already, a lot of thought into how this is going to come together.
I think we should spend some time talking about the rationale for the stadium too, and it is to bring people to campus. There's so much positive about CSU in the community and in the state and beyond, but we had fans going to Hughes that never experienced that in a granular way. And our experience is when people come to campus and see that we have invested $1.5 billion of money in new buildings and new infrastructure, which our new research lines and bringing in new students that we would not have had otherwise. It's a real transformative time for the university, and the stadium is a piece of that transformation.
Yeah, the stadium was always designed to be a nexus for the community, to really pull campus and community together. And, you know, I think intercollegiate athletics and particularly football is a lot of times in higher ed is the primary engagement asset for an institution. And we're seeing it happen already. I mean, we've had the building operating now for close to 6 weeks, and we've hosted nearly 20 events in the building. Looking forward, we have about 100 others scheduled. So these are even outside football games, and these are events that are, you know, 15 to 1,000 people, and it's really wonderful to see them not only experience the stadium but experience the campus. And as Fred had mentioned, you know, we've got alumni who really haven't had a direct connection to their alma mater since they graduated. The number of people I've talked to that say, you know, the last time I was on campus was probably when I was a student, and you think that that's been 20 years ago, and what's occurred, it's going to be a reintroduction of Colorado State to many, many people.
Well, and for that matter, Fort Collins as well. I oftentimes, when I'm down in Denver, I make it a point to ask people, have you ever been to Fort Collins? And I hear, you know, the answers I hear is, yeah, we've been to Fort Collins on the way up to I-80. Well, if you haven't, have you been in Old Town? If you haven't, then you've not really been to Fort Collins driving I-25. Or, yeah, I went to CSU. I haven't been back there in, you know, 10 years, but I think that the community has changed so much, and the university as well, and that investment is on campus is tremendous. I mean, in my short time in Fort Collins too, just to see the changes that have occurred and the upgrading of facilities, and you know, as a dad with a son there, I'm really, really proud of that. It's and he's very proud to, when we have visitors in town, to show off his campus. So.
This is an opportunity to welcome people back, and you know, to
Right.
campus. And when they do come back, we have really positive,
Right.
you know, positive input.
Well, it'll be exciting to see it all come together here soon, and after all this very meticulous planning, to see everything open up and people flow in, and it'll be fun to watch. I appreciate everybody joining me today. Thank you so much for taking the time. Before we end, are there any final thoughts, Darren, or everybody? Is there anything else anybody would like to add?
We're selling tickets. We just surpassed 15,000 season tickets. That's the high watermark in the history of the program. Our Oregon State game, which is the first game, is sold out, so we're working on a second sellout now, but there's plenty of opportunity for people that want to experience it. And even this Saturday, you know, we've got a pre-event going on August 5th, so it'll be pretty exciting for the community.
Sure to be a hot ticket this season.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would just wrap it up with, again, to say how critical the relationship is, and I think it's very strong. I think that when we do have tensions or differences, I think those relationships serve us well, and we work through those. I think, you know, oftentimes think about, you know, my next door neighbor who wonders, you know, just assumes that the relationship between a university and its town is highly effective. Well, it doesn't just happen. It happens by a lot of work and a lot of tending to, and whether that's city and county, city and state, city and university, and so I think the community is well served by those relationships, and I think when those are strong, we'll figure it out. It's got a, you know, the DNA of this community and this university is we ID the problems and we get those solved. So, and I think that, you know, I think that the changes that are occurring on the university campus and in the community, you know, I know it's very disruptive to our community, and there are a lot of people that have never been more excited, and there are a lot of people who are really struggling through this time, and so for those folks, I think, you know, what I'm hoping for is that there's an assurance that we're going to do everything we can to mitigate some of those impacts, and good people, good, competent, capable people, I think, working on it, and I like what you said about, you know, we're going to learn as we go through this. I told someone the other day that the first half, you know, as people come to the game, and the game starts, there's going to be adjustments being made for the exit of the game. And I know, because I think it's you who I heard that from, Fred. So there's going to be continuous improvement focus on this thing from the day that the event starts. So, and we hope that as we're learning through that the community's patient with us as well, and that we deliver on quality services.
Definitely. Well, thank you again, everybody, for joining me today for City at a Glance. If you have an opportunity this season, make sure to get out and check out the new stadium and just CSU in general. They have a lot going on there, and the city is happy to be working with them. Until next time, I'm David Young, and this has been City at a Glance.